Hey, this is Adrian Duntley with another WordPress Revolution WordPress tutorial. Today we'll be discussing working with post meta as arrays. I'll be referring mainly to WordPress's post meta, but keep in mind that user meta and comment meta also apply in the same manner, as do custom post type meta, which are also posts as far as WordPress and the database are concerned. Post meta is data that is associated with a post. A post does not necessarily mean the default blog post type. WordPress actually has 5 default post types. They are post, page, attachment, revision, and navigation menu. And these, any other custom post types, also comments and users, they all have post meta tables that are associated to them in the database. The post meta table consists of 4 columns: the meta ID, the parent post, comment, or user ID, the meta key, and the meta value. Each entry has a unique ID, is associated with the parent post, comment, or user, and structurally consists of key value pairs. And it is important to remember that WordPress's metadata, like WordPress options, are information stored as key and value. Now, since we're talking about arrays, I'm going to let you know that MySQL does not store arrays. You cannot store an array data type in a MySQL field. Instead, you have to use your programming language, in this case PHP, to convert the array or object into a string representation of the data. JSON is a well-known way of doing this. It's a well-known structure for converting objects into a string, but WordPress does not use JSON for object representation. Instead, it uses PHP's serialize method, which serializes objects in a string format that describes data based on type, quantity, and value. I think it's pretty kind of clever, actually, that if you take a look at this associative array right here, this is an array with 3 elements. It's an associative array. The keys are 1, 3, and num. The values are 2, 4, and the integer 5, respectively. This is the string representation, the serialized, PHP serialized string representation of this data. If you notice, A is obviously represents an array, S represents a string, and that's all that's, I here represents the integer, which is 5. Now, if this was a 6 instead of a 3, it would mean that there are 6 elements, and instead of having an associative array, you would have an array with the 6 elements. 1 would be a value, 2 would be a value, 3, 4, and none would be a value, and 5 would also be the last value, the 6th value, and it would be an integer. The rest would be strings. However, because the array is defined as having a quantity of 3, there are 3 elements in this array, serialize, the actually unserialized, will parse this and recognize that there's 3, and then probably just divide by 2. So every 2 represents 1 element, and therefore it is an associative array as a key value pair. Moving on, the 3 methods we'll be discussing today will be add, update, and get post meta. You'll notice that add and update post meta have 3 common parameters, but the 4th is different. The first parameter is the ID number of the post in question. This will typically be post ID in the loop. The second is the name of the meta key as a string, and the third is the meta value you wish to assign to that meta key. Add post meta's 4th parameter is called unique because you will provide a Boolean value, true or false, indicating whether you want to allow more than one meta key in the database's meta field relative to this post of the same name as the one provided. This means that if you have a key called to eat, that key can be present in the database only once if you set unique to true, or if set to false, can be in the database as many times as you add it to the database, each with its own value associated to it. So let's take a look at a visual representation of how the data is stored in the database. Here, the parent ID is small because it's not pertinent in this discussion. Just keep in mind that the data we are discussing all belongs to the same post. The other 3 fields are ID, the unique identifier representing one specific meta key value per entry, the meta key, and the meta value. If we have 5 food choices, seafood, Italian, sushi, organic, and Greek, I can have a key in the database for each of them titled to eat. So therefore I have the same meta key that represents a different value listed 5 times, all relative to the same post. Because each of these keys, all having the same name, have unique IDs, they can be distinguished one from another. The purpose for doing it this way is 1, because meta is stored as key value pairs, and 2, querying. Because you can have a user interface for searching, filtering, etc., you will need to have a way of querying metadata associated with a post. WordPress's meta query class allows for this. However, if you store data as a serialized array, like so, you would have to filter the WordPress query and customize it to query by way of a regular expression looking for a like pattern matching something to this effect here, where you have type identifier, colon, number of, in this case number of characters relative to the data type, another colon, quotation marks, and then the string in question, quotation marks because this is a string here. And that's not a very efficient way of doing this. To combat this issue, and knowing full well that people would need a way to store different data with the same key in resemblance of an array, WordPress provides this way of storing data with add post meta or add user meta, etc. So, before you begin creating methods for storing meta, you must first plan ahead and decide how you want to use that data later on. If it will be for use internally, options or settings for instance, then you can store data as an array and not worry about querying. If the data you are storing will be queryable and used for custom meta queries as a result of user action on the front end, you may want to strongly consider having multiples of the same key with varying associated values. It is necessary at this point to discuss update versus add post meta. Using update post meta, if the meta key does not already exist, the method will create it. This allows you to use update exclusively regarding add post meta, and using update to both update and add. It's okay if you wish to do this as long as you have planned ahead and know what you are using it for. When using update post meta, you are sacrificing the ability to define whether the key you are adding will be unique. By default, the unique value is set to false, so you have now allowed for multiple keys of the same name to be added to the database, to the meta table associated with that post. This may get you in trouble if you deviate from your original plan of using update exclusively and then later on use add post meta instead. Furthermore, update post meta will, if the 4th parameter is omitted, replace all existing values of all keys with the same name. So if I have to eat here 5 different times with different values, and I use update post meta, and I just call, let's say it looks like this. Update post meta. I pass my first parameter, which is my parent post ID, to 1. My meta key is to eat. And I'm going to update to pizza. So in this case here, I have omitted the 4th parameter, which is previous value. And if I run this method right here, what will happen is that each of these values will be pizza. It's going to change every single value in the table with this meta key relative to this post to the new value, because we haven't defined a second or the 4th parameter, which is previous post. So it doesn't know which one I want to update, so it's just going to update all of them. So when using update post meta to update a meta value, you must make sure that you are either using the and expecting only one meta key to be affected, or you are providing the 4th parameter, previous value. So with the previous example, if you want to update only seafood, I would have to do this. Simply provide the 4th parameter as seafood, and the resulting array, or the resulting result set, will be pizza as the first entry, and then the rest will be as they were. Okay, let's go ahead and code a little bit and go through what we just talked about. So right here is going to be my test code, and we're going to go ahead and create our 5 values for unique identifiers, unique meta entries into the database. So instead of adding post meta 5 times separately, I'm just going to go through a for each loop and add post meta, just like this. So here we have an array with our 5 different types of foods to eat placed into this variable. I'm going to go through a for each loop with this variable. Each individual element is going to be array. I'm going to add post meta to the post parent ID, which is 1. To eat will be the meta key, the value, and false, meaning that I do not want this to be unique. I want several of the same values to be able to be assigned to this post. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to update it, and what's going to happen is I'm going to get post meta for to eat. True means single, I want a single value. This is no. I want a false, meaning single is false, meaning I want an array back. It's going to be put in this variable. I'm going to echo pre so it's pretty, and then I'm going to print it as a print r because I cannot echo an array. I'll just get array back. So I'm going to print r the array so it actually echoes back or prints the array all the way. So let's refresh this and take a look at our array. Here we go. So this is what it looks like in the database. I have to eat, to eat, to eat, to eat, to eat, and then I have a value, different value for each of these entries. So what WordPress does, it goes into the database, it gives me every single meta key that I asked for of this with this name, and that is associated with this parent ID right here, and all of these are. And then it puts that into an array result set because I set single to false in get post meta. Oops, right here. So get post meta, I set single to false, meaning I want an array result set back. And what WordPress will do is it will create an array. Whenever I put false, it will create an array. You can consider it doing that right off the bat. And then it will start adding the result set to the array. In this case, I get 5 different elements within this array, and it gives it back to me as what you see here. Let's take a look at updating post meta with a single value and not identifying the 4th parameter, which is previous value. So now my to eat variable has 5 separate entries, each pertaining to a different type of food. So I'm going to go ahead and update post meta here, and I'm going to put 1 parameter, which will be the new value parameter. I'm going to say pizza. I'm going to omit the 4th parameter, which is the previous value, and we'll see that when I refresh, it updated every single value. It didn't know which one to update, so it said screw it, I'm just going to update everything. So now that we have this, let me delete this. Refresh, it's gone. And we'll go ahead and place our for each loop once again. And now we have the original array result set. Now let's go ahead and update only one. We'll update seafood and give it a value of pizza. So in this case, get rid of the for each loop again. I'm going to update post meta to eat. I'm going to update pizza, but I want to specify the 4th parameter, the previous value, and it has to be identical to the value that is in there currently. And I'm going to say seafood, and I want seafood to be updated to pizza. And let's take a look at how that prints out. Now we have pizza at replace seafood, and the rest remain the same. Now when doing this, you might not know if you capitalized S in seafood, you might not know what the value is at all, in order to get that value, you would get the result set. You would get post meta and get the result set. You'd probably set this to false, and you'd loop through the array, figure out which one you want to update, and you would supply your fourth parameter here from that loop, or from the results of that loop, after you've found what you're looking for. And that's how you would do that. To place an array into the database, you simply pass the array either directly or as a variable into the new value parameter. So in this case here, if I was going to update post meta, this is an array of these 5 different food types. Then I would supply the fourth parameter to as the array. Or if I was going to add post meta, I would do it this way. I'm moving way too fast here. Let me slow down. In this case, I'm going to set the fourth parameter true, meaning unique. I want it true. I want only one of these values because I know that I'm going to be working with the result set as an array and programmatically. I'm not going to be adding separate values with the same key. I'm not going to be querying based on user input, and I know that I'm going to be in full control of what's happening here. So I'm going to set this to true. I want only one of these, so when I retrieve this, I know exactly what I'm getting, and I'm going to pass in the array. So I can do it with add post meta, or I can do it with update post meta. And if I do it with update post meta, the unique value is automatically set to false. But like I said before, even if this is false, and I'm using as long as I'm using update post meta exclusively, then it's okay because it will only create one, and whenever I update to actually update and not create, it will overwrite the only value that's in there with the new value. So it's okay to use update post meta to add post meta as long as you're using it exclusively, and don't come back and add post meta later with this fourth parameter either omitted or set to false, because if you do, then you'll have two to-eat meta keys in the database relative to this post, and you might get varying results based on how you retrieve your data. So either of these will work and create the exact same result set in the database, the exact same entry in the database. So I'm going to just update in this case. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to refresh. Now after placing the array in the database, the result is going to look like this. This is what it actually looks like in the database. What WordPress did is it serialized the array, converted it into a serialized string that represents an array. So it looks just like this in the database. It's a string value relative to the key to eat. This is how we kind of expect it to look like. To eat represents the array that we put into it, but MySQL again does not store arrays. So retrieval of the array, I believe, is what causes the most confusion. The purpose is because the single parameter can be a bit misleading. Let's go ahead and consider this. Comment this out and get post meta single. We can either set this to false or true. If the data is stored not as an array but in the fashion of the previous examples, like so, single is a Boolean value that is passed to define whether we want the result set to be returned as an array or as a single value. Single value infers that you will be getting a single string back based on the examples above. And that is correct in this case here. So if we take a look at this and we set single to false, meaning we want an array back, this is what it looks like. This is what we get back when we set it to false. What it does is WordPress goes into the database, gets every single to eat meta key, because that is what we define in the get post meta, relative to the parent ID, and puts it into a result set and turns that into an array. So it's an array of 5 string values. That's going to be our result set. However, if we set getPostMeta's single value to true, we're saying that we want a single string return. So what WordPress does is it still goes in, gets the result set, but it returns the very first value of relative to the meta key relative to the parent post. So it's only going to give us the very first value in this result set. And this is what it will be. This is our result set, and it'll be seafood. So if we say get post meta parent ID 1 to eat single true, it means we want only one string back, and it's going to give us the very first, the earliest in the result set. In this case, it would be seafood. Before moving on, I would like you to think of single equals false as asking WordPress for an array, and immediately WordPress begins with results equals array. So as soon as you say, I want an array back, WordPress creates the array. Now everything returned will be placed within the array. Because we have 5 strings, the result set will be an array of 5 strings in this case. Add, update, and get post meta, user meta, etc. all deal with arrays by serializing or unserializing. So if we pass an array into it, WordPress will serialize it and place that in the database as a string. If we ask for data, regardless of whether we set single to true or false, WordPress will parse that string if it is considered serialized and unserialize the data, returning it as an array, returning it just the way we pass it in. With this in mind, let's consider one meta key of to eat with a value of the array of the five food types. So this right here. It was passed in as an array, and in the database it looks like this. It's a string, a serialized string. So in order to retrieve that data, we have to use the get method. In this case, it's a post, so we'll use getPostMeta. Now we have to decide whether we want to have a single value returned or an array. Now just thinking about getPostMeta false, we would assume that false, we don't want a single value, we want an array, would be what we want. However, it's not. If we consider what I said before, that WordPress creates an array, it unserializes data that has already been passed in as an array, then what should be obvious, now that we know that it works this way, is that WordPress is going to create an array, and then it's going to fill this array with the array that we actually want, like this. So we're going to get a result set of an array, and then a nested array with the actual result set that we want, which is the array that we put in is going to be housed by the default array that WordPress creates when we ask for a result set as an array. So what we get is a nested array, and the only way to access data now is by either looping through this first array or accessing it directly by index. Then we have to do the same with the inner array. So we would have to access the result by accessing first 0, which is the first index in this array, and then accessing the individual values within our nested array by their index value. This case here, 1 would be Italian, 0 seafood, and so on. Or we could do nested for each loops, or nested loops, where we would loop through all the result sets in the array. In this case, we'd only have 1, so we'd loop through 0, and then we loop again through the result set of the array that we know that we put into the database. Let's go ahead and take a look at this programmatically. So I'm not really sure where we're at here, so I'm going to delete the post meta, save this. Let's refresh. I'll have an empty array. And now let's directly add or update, doesn't matter. And let's add post meta with this array. And we are going to get post meta with single set to false, meaning that we want an array back. And you would think that's how you would want it based on the fact that single means single value or an array. However, if we refresh, we'll see that we get the nested array. So we have an array. At the 0 index is the actual array that we put into it and the actual result set that we would expect or want back. So we need to set this to true, meaning we want a single result set back. Because we put an array into it, we want only one array, the array that we put into it, returned to us. So by setting this to true, it is saying we want the latest of the result set. We want that back as basically a string value. WordPress will grab that string value, which is a serialized array, recognize it as serialized data, unserialize it, and return it as an array. So if I save this, update, and refresh, we are going to get exactly what we want back. This is the array that we put into it and the array that we expect back. So whenever we get post meta for an array that we put into it, we need to set single to true as long as we are working with only one meta key of this name. Now if we have several arrays and we are using this loop method here where we add multiple meta keys of the same name to the database with unique set to false, we can store arrays in each of these. We can store string values, we can store arrays, other data types into each of the keys that we create of the same name, and we can retrieve them by using get post meta and set this to false, meaning that we want an array, and it will give us the result set with each of those meta keys and each of those values back, and it will unserialize any arrays that we put into it. So you could have a multi-dimensional array with several nested arrays, and you can get all that back and parse it however you want. So it can be really complicated or it can be really simple based on what you want. Typically we'll use add post meta or update post meta with one single array that we're putting into the new value, and then we get post meta, we set single to true, meaning we want only one result set back, and then we'll get that same array that we put into it back. Now we know how WordPress stores metadata into the database and how it retrieves that data. Hopefully this clears up any confusion about storing and retrieving post-meta arrays, user meta arrays, and the like. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the forum, ask below this tutorial in the videos. Do not ask in the YouTube comment section because I don't look at that, I won't look at that, and hopefully no one else really will. It's not the best place for discussion. Go to wordpressrevolution.com. Search for this video, find this video, and comment and discuss this video below. I will answer those as I have time, and hopefully the community will answer as well. Thanks for watching, and there will be many, many more to come. Support is appreciated by donating, visiting external things on the site that you find at all interesting, external links, whatever, involving yourself in the forum, not just by asking questions, but by responding to inquiries with any knowledge you might have of the subject. And until next time.